Hello, everyone, and welcome. It is now 2 o'clock Eastern Time. It's time for us to get started. I am Donald Taylor, and I am responsible for membership and communications at Tash. Welcome to today's presentation 10 Tips to Create an Inclusive and Independent Life, presented by Michelle Techner. This is the first episode in Tash's 2026 webinar series. For attendees who do not know us, TASH is a values and research-based advocacy association with a 50-year history of advocating for the rights of people with disabilities. We are located in Washington, D.C., with local chapters in 14 states. Originally founded in 1975 by university researchers to help prepare the first generation of special education teachers, we quickly expanded to include family members, self-advocates, teachers, service providers, and others dedicated to the cause of guaranteeing that people with disabilities are able to participate in all aspects of life. In addition to webinar series such as this, we offer a scholarly quarterly journal, Research and Practice for Persons with Severe Disabilities, a practitioner journal, Inclusive Practices, a monthly email newsletter, Tash in Action, and Washington Update, a podcast, our chapters and issue-based communities of practice, and our annual Outstanding Leadership and Disability Law Symposium and Awards Dinner this year on July 21st, and our annual conference to be held in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania on December 3rd through 5th. You can learn more about TASH, including becoming a member or attending our annual conference at tash.org. The format of today's webinar is our presenter, Michelle, will speak for about 50 minutes. Then there will be 10 minutes at the end for questions and answers. Before getting to the main event, a few tips on participating in this webinar. Please note if you move your mouse cursor to the bottom of the screen, the Zoom menu will slide up from the bottom, and you'll have a few controls of interest. All the way to the left is an icon that's like a tabletop style microphone. You can click the little arrow in the corner to adjust the volume on your own computer if things are a little low for you. If you need captioning, that button is all the way to the right. Depending upon your screen layout, it might be hiding under the More button. If you click the circle with the three dots in it, you'll get an additional menu and you can turn on captioning there. There is a chat window. In a few minutes, I'm going to turn off my camera and microphone, but I will be monitoring the chat. If you need any assistance, you can reach me there or via my email at dtaylor@tash.org. Um, Sometimes the chat can get going a little quickly, so if you have questions for our presenter, do not put them in the chat. Sometimes they'll get lost in the scroll. There is a Q&A box. It's kind of in the middle of the menu. If you click Q&A, you can put your question there, and I will be reading them at the end for Michelle. Today, we're excited to have Michelle Techner to share with us 10 tips to create an inclusive and independent life. Michelle Techner is the proud mom of three boys. The youngest, Raymond, has Down syndrome, and she is the author of the book Fully Included: Stories to Inspire Inclusion with her husband, Stacy. She also has over 25 stories published on disability and Down syndrome. Michelle has been featured on several podcasts and webinars and is a leading expert on inclusion in both public and private Catholic schools. She is the current president and founder of FIRE Foundation in Northeast Florida. She describes herself as an passionate inclusionista who has fought yearly for her son Raymond to be included in school. She has coached hundreds of parents with inspiration and guidance for school meetings and IEPs. Her son Raymond is used to being the first. He was one of the first students in Phoenix, Arizona to be fully included in Catholic school. He went on to be the inaugural student of a brand new program in Maryland, as well as the first student with Down syndrome in the Diocese of St. Petersburg to graduate fully included. He is an amazing drummer, actor, and an amazing guy who loves God and his family. Um, I had said in the billing for this webinar that he would be with us today, but unfortunately, he currently works 5 days a week, so he's at work today. But please join me in welcoming Michelle Techner.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Donald. Thanks, Tash, for having me. Excited to share some of our our secrets, our tips, our tricks. And I want to say very first off, it's bumpy. There's always going to be some bumps in the road. And so we're going to take those as they come. We're going to smooth those over and we're going to get to them before they get to be mountains. We're going to get them when they're small, when they're molehills, and that's going to stop a lot of mountains being created. I am Michelle Tetchner. I am proud, so proud to be Raymond's mom. Um, Raymond is currently, as he said, working 5 days a week. He has a job at Biddy and Bo's Coffee. He has another job at another coffee shop called Happy Brew Coffee, where they also hire people with disabilities. And he's always looking for something new. So we decided to try and on the job training at a pizza place. And so he is learning some new things that he's never tried before, never done before. And that's where we're at. So he's actually working 5 3-hour shifts, give or take, all week. So um, part of our goal today is to try to find and remind you. Sometimes I'm speaking to the choir. Sometimes I know you moms and dads out there already know this. We're out there to find gifts and talents of every child and make sure that they have the supports and the things in place that they need to grow forward. Um, Raymond's current living situation is with a roommate named, I won't say his name, with a roommate that he adores. They're getting along great. They've been roommates for a year. So they live independently, the two of them. Before that, he lived with another young lady, and it worked out great that they were boy and girl. The location didn't work out as well as we had hoped because it was a good 30 to 35-minute drive down there. And so when he needed things, we weren't comfortable that it took us so long to get down there. But at his new place with his male roommate, who is on the spectrum, they live down at the beach. And so he's got this great apartment that they're renting. And it's working out wonderfully. He can walk a couple blocks to go get coffee. He can walk a couple blocks to go get lunch. And he takes full advantage of being so close. So nothing is ever too hard. Nothing is ever too far. It's just that we just need to break it down into smaller chunks, and then we can make those supports in place. We can make that shift, and then we can grow forward. My first slide is you as the parent are the expert in the room. I just want to remind everybody that you are. I remember going into a meeting as a first grader. We started off in public school. So this was a public school teacher, and she said, "Oh, I've worked with so many kids with Down syndrome. I love kids with Down syndrome. I kind of consider myself an expert." And I said, "How many kids with Down syndrome have you worked with?" And she said 3 or 4. And I thought, well, Raymond's only 5, but I wouldn't consider that an expert. I spend all day with him. I spend every night with him. I take him to sports on the weekend. I do Special Olympics and watch all of the other kids around. I'm the expert. And so I think it took me a while to remember that I am the expert in the room. You, as the parent, know your child best. So remember when you're going into those IEPs, when you're going into those transitions, when you're going into those job interviews, you are the expert of your child. And remember too that their diagnosis is not the whole part of them. I actually had a mom texting with me today, and her son had, I know I'm afraid I'm going to say this wrong, hydrocephalitis. And it struck me that I know nothing about that. But and I'm assuming she didn't at the beginning either. And so she went to a doctor, and I'm sure he said to her, "I'm the expert." But you have to remember that that's only part of your child. Raymond is not Down syndrome. Raymond is Raymond, and he happens to have Down syndrome. He happens to have an extra chromosome. And so when we look at the whole person, we know that that is only a part of their life. The other part of his life is that he's a drummer. He is fun. He wants to make people laugh. He wants to, dance and sing. He is a fun guy to be around. And that is who Raymond is. Down syndrome is not Raymond's, does not eclipse who he is. Um, Before I get too far along, I want to say this, that we love teachers. We have had so many good teachers in our lives, but we have also had bad teachers. And if you happen to be at that season in your life, this too shall change. Wait a semester, wait a year, because there are great teachers out there. And not any teacher signed up to be a teacher without thinking that they had the heart and the mindset to love this child and give the child what they need. So I think we often need to be reminded that that is who a teacher is at their heart. Sometimes we just have to get deep to their heart. Um, I love the word inclusion, but I think that it is overused. And so we often use the word belonging now because I think that that's a better descriptor of what we're looking for in life. We don't want only a seat at the table. Inclusion is not oh, we did that yesterday and a box to check. Inclusion is a mindset, it is a journey. It is going to last a year, it is going to last years. And guess what? It lasts throughout everyone's life, not just Raymond's life, not just your child's life. Inclusion and belonging are a lifelong process. And the younger we can get to those kids, the more they'll be along on our journey. Because it does affect inclusion in school. If the student is in that general education classroom, affects 25 other people. It affects the other classroom that also sees him at lunch. It affects the whole school that also sees him in the hallways. Then all of these kids have a comfort level with being around people with disabilities. They grow up and get used to Raymond laughing loudly or telling fart or burp jokes, because let's be honest, he's a boy. But they get used to that and they know that that's his sense of humor. They're not offended. They're not surprised when he's a little chaotic. And so they can grow up together. And then guess what? They go on to workplaces together. And now these other typical students, typical children are now going to hire Raymond and work next to him. They're going to live next to him. They're going to be at the pool, at the apartments together. They're going to grow up and welcome them into community, welcome them into church, welcome them into everyday life. And so that's what we're really looking for. So this is a huge season of belonging that we're trying to create by inclusion in the general education classroom. Um, when we were in fifth grade, we started to switch over to Catholic private school. And I love Mrs. Green. She's one of our favorite teachers, as well as the principal at this school, Mrs. Laurel. And this was in Scottsdale, Arizona. We lived there for quite a while and have recently moved to Florida. um, Mrs. Green came to me on the first day of school and she said, "Can I ask you some questions?" And so I said, "Absolutely," though I did not have any idea what she was going to say. And she said, "I really, really want this to work. Tell me what to do." And I was so taken aback by her honesty, because this is not, again, this is not a one and done. There is no solution to the problem. This is an ongoing journey that we all need to have communication. We all need to participate in, and we all need to be transparent. And when she opened her heart, I knew that this was going to work. She was one of the best teachers, most open-hearted, open-minded teachers that we had all along in our journey. And I really love that she was brave enough to say that and to ask those questions. And that created a relationship with us that was maintained for the next 2 years. So that was fantastic. Um, I'll skip on to the second slide, which is creating a vision. Creating a vision and setting goals is super important. It is also important that we make sure that your child gives input into all of this. So the vision and goals when you're younger, when you're a younger parent, they may be, you know, this month or this week, even, this may be until Christmas, or this may be this calendar year. Whatever you set up as the goals are fine and great. But you also need to make sure that you're taking in your child's input, that they're buying into these goals, that they have a reward system or a sticker chart or whatever is going to make them buy into all of this. And by buying in, I mean knowing what your child's currency is what I call it. And that is, sticker charts are going to work for some kids. but there may be a better way. There might be you're going to gain $3 every day that you're in school. So by the end of the week, you could have $15. But if you get, in the perfect world, you're going to get 15, but perhaps you're only going to get 12, or perhaps you're only going to get 10. What is the basis for success? They have to get what? What do they get? And it needs to be carefully explained to them so that they can buy in into that as well, into that system. A reminder too is that I have a lot of parents that come to me and say, my child had a meltdown the other day and it caused a whole bunch of drama and the principal got involved and all the stuff. And the first thing I do is remind them and say, okay, this was one meltdown. That was 1/2 hour out of a 6 hour day. And so let's back up and mark what success looks like. And I'm not justifying a meltdown and I'm not justifying actions, but underneath all of that is a student who is there for 6 hours a day. And if they're having little tiny things that are happening for 5 minutes once an hour, that's still pretty darn good. 5 minutes an hour only equals a half hour. So of that 6 hour day, they haven't, ruined anything. That's, you have to break down what success looks like to you, and the IEP team needs to define that. And everyone's on the same page in order to look at what success looks like. Always use person-centered planning when you're doing things like that. And I'm going to say child a lot today, but I do want to say young adult as well, because I do want parents of older kids to be able to see how this can move them forward as well. But there are a lot of online tools for person-centered planning, and the state of California will allow you to use some of your transition monies to hire someone who does person-centered planning. And when you start using the map features, your child is squarely in the middle. And you are a spoke. The dad is a spoke, sister is a spoke, the support person is a spoke. Everything revolves around them and what they need. And I think that that's so important to remember, is that this is creating the best world for them. And that's when they get to be center. Our kids often aren't center. And I think that can a lot of times affect their self-esteem and how they feel about themselves. When they're told that they can be helpers, when they're told that they can be line leaders, when they're told that they can step up and be that leader, it changes their perspective. And I feel like we don't often give them that opportunity. So that's a great thing to add as well. I heard a great story recently about a family that takes turns ordering for one another. So if they go to an Italian restaurant, before the server comes, mom will say, I want the pasta shells. Dad will say, I want the spaghetti with meatballs. And brother will say, I want whatever. And so the fourth child, the fourth person has to order for everyone. And so that is like, it's a memory game. It's a leadership game. It's an input, because now they're the only ones who are talking with the server. So they have to say what my mom wants, my dad wants. It was just really eye-opening to see how being in that leadership position can really allow questions to be asked, and they'll say, nope, address the questions to him, please. And then he'll say, Mom, did you want meat sauce with it or just red sauce? It was just really a fun little game to play and do family bonding at the same time. And also don't remember to, again, going back to goals and creating visions, where do you want your child to end up? And I know that this question is overwhelming at age 8, 6. I completely understand that. But what do you think your child is going to do? Do you think they're going to go to college? And if that is an option, then you need to say that. And you need to say that in the IEP meeting. And you need to say, remember, he may go off to college. The looks on their faces are going to change. The look on their faces are going to be surprised. They don't know what you know. And as parents, we all know that there are over 200 college programs that are out there. So going to college might very well be an option. Having a job might very well be an option. Living alone independently might be an option. And so you've got to bring up all of those different options for them to hear. So you don't want to leave off reading. Sometimes we're questioned, what do you want to concentrate on? Well, for me, it's pretty easy. I want Raymond to live independently, so I want him to know how to read. I want him to read recipes, so we need to do fractions. I want him to read the bus schedule, so he needs time. I want him to have a job, so he needs to read the employee bulletin on the back door. I want him to know how to punch in. So he needs to have the digital math as well as clock math. And so when you know what your goal is, you're creating the test, and then you're going to change chain backwards in order to get those skills. And so that's how we try to live our life is what is our ultimate job? What is our ultimate goal? And how do we get them there going backwards? I see Donald struggling with my PowerPoint, but I'm going to skip on to number three, which is how to start and when to start. And mine is easy. Start young, start now. Um, I remember when Raymond was little, I started him and I wish I'd started sooner, but we probably started about age 10 or age 12. And I made him check out. When we were at Target, I handed him the credit card. When we were at the gas station inside, I gave him the credit card. And at the time, he would always say my code out loud. So we had to work on that, but he was doing it correctly, but he was saying the code out loud. So does that look like success or does that look like failure? If at first it stressed me out, but the bottom line is no one was really listening and the cashier could care less. And so you have to break down what the hurdles are and what success looks like. And so definitely start young, start doing little things. I would also say safety is first, always making sure that everything is safe. Um, for example, we went on vacation one time and we do a lot of stuff when we're on vacation. We have more downtime, we do adventurous things, and so we try new things on vacation. And so we drove around this little convenience store. We had to circle it 3 or 4 times. There's, where's the back door, where's the front door? There's a standalone building. We all went in together. There was nobody else in there except for the cashier. My husband and I came out. We left Raymond inside and we gave him a $5 bill and said, pick out anything you want. This is your reward for doing this day. And he's like, no, no, I can't. I can't. And we were like, you can do this. Look, you get to pick. What do you want to pick? M&Ms, Hershey bar, Raymond, whatever you want, you pick. It has to be motivating for them, right? They have to want to do it. And so we said, we're going to leave you. You don't have to hurry. Pick whatever you want. So we go out to the car and we're parked right in front of the doorway. And it's taking a long time. It's taking 3 or 4 minutes. And now it's going on for a while. And then we can see Raymond up at the counter and he's talking to this man, the cashier. We're like, what is taking so long? And then the cashier comes to the door with Raymond and he opens the door and says, I'm not making this young man pay for anything. I was like, so sweet, super sweet story. But we forgot about the paying part. So Raymond never got to give him the money, never got to get change back in his hand. So he went through part of the transaction, but not the complete transaction. But those kind of stories, fulfill your heart too, as well. There are kind people out there, and there are people willing to help. Um, Another funny story is when Raymond was at UNF. Raymond has gone to college, and we would load up his card with a certain amount of money every week. And the theory is when he spent that, he was done. So we're on like about third week of college, and I'm watching his balance, and I know it's got to be low because I looked in his garbage the night before, and there were 2 soda cans in there. And so I'm like, good, he's fine. He's not going to get anything more to eat this week, right? So I go up there the next day, and there's two more cans in the garbage. So I went downstairs and asked the cashier, is he having trouble with his credit card? How is this working? And she goes, oh, he just comes up here and swipes and swipes. And then one of the students behind him comes up and swipes and buys it for him. She's like, those kids are so sweet. So again, best laid plans, best, setting everything into boundaries. And then the kindness of others can catch us off guard. So Definitely nice people out there, and we are, we're all interdependent. So that's another word I'll touch on soon. Um, but your goal when they're young is to create a self-advocate. We want them to be able to express their own needs. We want them to perhaps have a break card on their desk that's going to say, I need a break. I need the restroom. I need a drink of water. There's many kids out there, special needs, diagnosed or not, humans out there, myself included, that doesn't like to sit still for very long. As you can see, my hands flying around. We have bodies, we're human. Sometimes we need to stand up and sit down and keep going in order to keep our energy up, in order to get your mind working and you're refreshing yourself. And so those are okay things to be asking for as far as accommodations go. So making sure that they have a voice in what they need, whether it's the rubber bands underneath their desk, going to the back where there's a beanbag cushion. What do they need in the room so that they're staying in the room? They're still paying attention and listening to all of that material that's going on, but they're still, actively being there. Give them a voice, whether that's at home or at school. Give them the option, give them the reward, give them the bravery to try new things. I relate going to new situations and some of the stuff that our kids do. For example, Raymond loves to walk down and get salads for lunch. That's our premise every day. Bacon and eggs for breakfast. He cooks them himself, some kind of salad for lunch, and then a healthy dinner. And he usually cooks taco salad. So it's nothing fancy. Those are all really easy things to do. The salad can either be at home, but oftentimes it's out at a restaurant. And so he walks down to the restaurant. And I'm not there. He does this himself. He orders. He usually picks the same thing, pays for it, and then sits down. But that was really scary for him at first. And remember too that though our kids have moments of fear just as we do. Sometimes we think, oh, they don't care, they don't mind. Sometimes they're oblivious to things, but that doesn't mean that they're not nervous. I went into a seminar the other day and I was standing outside, kind of unknowingly prepping myself to walk in because you don't, when beyond those double doors, you don't know what's there. You don't know how many people are there. You don't know if it's going to be loud or quiet, like that trepidation you feel right before you walk in. Our kids feel that too, and we need to remind them that they are brave and that they can do this, and pep them up a little bit, just like we want to walk in with somebody. That's the perfect scenario, right? Let's find that typical peer so that Raymond can walk in with somebody so that they can be there with him, helping him and giving him the courage that he may need. um, Moving on to the fourth slide, I labeled it "Finding Your Rock Star." Who is your person in your neighborhood or online that you watch and seek out? Um, for us, it was a young man who was about 5 years older than Raymond, and he had 10 siblings. I'll say that first of all. So he had built-in inclusion right into his family. And so for them, he was never going to go to a special classroom. That was their family was inclusive. He could do it. Of course he could do it. So of course he could do that in school. And so for them, it was a no-brainer. And so we watched them, we stalked them. He was 5 years older than Raymond, so we watched him at his first job. We watched him in drama. We watched him wherever they went. And so for us, it was kind of our rising star. Today is even easier. You can go online and you can see some of these kids, Ruby's Rainbow, that are going off to college, and you can see their success stories. You can see some of these big programs like Clemson, the one in New York. I heard great reviews from Mississippi State the other day. So you don't even have to do a whole lot of searching in order to watch some of these kids be really successful and included in these college programs. There are so many different there are so many kids who are doing so many wonderful things, and that's the beauty of it all. Is if your child is an artist, it's super easy to go on and see some of these people with disabilities who are creating this beautiful art. What does your child want to do? If they're an actor, you can see um, Holly Simon's Nate that's in movies, you know. You can see Kayla who won Miss Delaware, um, Miss Congeniality. There's all of these things that you can see without having to do too much work. And then you start to think about what you want your child to do. What do you, should your goals be? What is his interest? And then kind of fine tune your goals to that. Um, Also, volunteering is a great way to get them involved in your community and also to learn how to give back. Um, a lot of times we forget about that. You know, we do a lot of things for them and they need to do a lot of things for other people as well. You know, so they're a whole rounded person. I remember at Gigi's in Annapolis, it was one of our favorite places that we went to when we lived in Maryland. Um, Raymond met this young little boy named Mark that he just loved. And so he started helping in the little kids class on Saturday mornings. It wasn't convenient for us. It wasn't easy to, but he loved it so much. And he just liked this little boy named Mark. And so they hang out for an hour and Raymond would help with all the little kids. So it's a good way for him to give back to the community, which is important too. Um, Finding your village, that's slide number 5. Um, for us, support was super important. We were creating paths that hadn't necessarily been carved out yet. And so we wanted to make sure that we had our positive affirmation people around us that were going to lift us up, that were going to be there when I said I needed something, when I could, you know, vent to somebody that understood what I was talking about. And that doesn't necessarily have to be only in the special needs families. I have some great friends who cheer Raymond on from afar. I have lots of friends who love seeing Raymond on a regular basis, but they don't have special needs children themselves. But they have a kind heart and they're always willing to give of themselves. Um, we also make sure that we make lots of connections for Raymond so that he's creating his own village as well. We do Special Olympics. We make sure we're introducing him to people at church, including the priests, including the lectors. We do advocating at a state level. Sometimes we do national advocating. His favorite is Young Life, and our local Young Life has a Capernaum group. This Capernaum group happens to bring in typical students with the persons with disabilities. So it's a combined group. And so I tell you, they have some great fun together. And huge shout out to Amy Franks, who started it at the church where we go. It is amazing. And Raymond has created some really good friends. One of his friends texted me on Tuesday night and said, making sure Raymond's available for supper. I text him and it sounds like he is. I'm going to pick him up at 6:30. I'm like, absolutely, go for it. Love it. You know, that's what we want. That's the goal, right? Is for us to have friends. I try to stay out of it as much as I can. I monitor it. I know where he is. Um, Talking about tips and tools, we use like 360. So I have Raymond, I know where he is at all times. Um, we have a ring on the front of his door. We have a special fire alarm system that will ring me when the smoke alarm goes off, which it has. Raymond has overcooked his bacon before, and so has his roommate. And so it goes to my phone and it will continue beeping until I shut it off. And then they just know to open the doors and open all the windows. And it's really, really sweet. Raymond's roommate's like, I'm so sorry. I'm like, just lower the temperature. It's okay. We all do it. Don't pretend like we haven't all burned something before. It's another hurdle. But I also am very specific in the words that I use because I don't want him to feel defeated, right? I don't want him to feel like he shouldn't cook. That's not what I'm saying. I want to make sure that I am not the hurdle. I want him to feel successful and I want him to try again. And so that's always the goal, is to keep moving forward. Um, Number 6 on the slide is be uncomfortable. And that goes hand in hand with some of that technology. It can be uncomfortable to let them do things without us. It can be uncomfortable to let them try new things and make sure that we're standing back and watching and not doing hand over hand all the time, letting them try their hand at something. Um, there's always an accommodation that we can do. Yes, Raymond cooks bacon and eggs. I did say that. Guess what? Raymond doesn't cook real bacon. Raymond cooks turkey bacon, which does not splatter. So see how that's an accommodation that we can adjust for. Uh, and he is messy. Don't get me wrong. I posted not very long ago about how he spent the night at our house and he doesn't cook over there very often, and we have a gas stove and he has an electric. And so when he was using the gas stove, he was very messy. He had to be reminded how to turn the burner on and off again because he hasn't done it in months. And when he left, it's a mess. But I can't stop him from trying. That's not fair. That's not moving forward. That's making me feel comfortable, but that's not helping the situation. So we need to always remember to try to step back, step out of it. This is one time. Let them make the mess. Let them try and keep moving forward. Don't let that fear win. Don't let that mess win. And like I said, parents, do not be the hurdle to all of this. I know it gets exhausting to be the chauffeur. I know that. I know it's hard sometimes to call VR again, to get that other job. I know it's hard to call an IEP meeting, but you have to do those things in order to get your child where they need to be. That's your role. You are the business manager. And so when you're sitting in that IEP meeting, this meeting is not about you and how they hurt your feelings. This is not about the attitude that they're throwing. This is about coming together and getting this child what they need and taking ourselves out of this and making sure we're concentrating here, right here, getting them what they need. Um, and again, our kids are so brave, just making sure you're propping them up, giving them encouragement. It's a lot sometimes. Um, Moving on to number 7, find and utilize typical peers and kids from school. So for us, I always said that I can find Special Olympics and I can find a Down Syndrome Association meeting, but I cannot find typical peers. So I need I need Raymond to be surrounded by typical peers in school so that he has that accessibility to them. He needs their rich language, he needs their social cues, he needs to learn from them so that as he grows into a job, grows into college, grows into being a roommate in the apartment, he knows how to act and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, how to say he's sorry, how to say, hey, dude, all of those kinds of things he's going to learn around typical peers. And so for us, that was always our vision of going with typical peers. We found a lot of that through art. Raymond took an art class that he loved. He made several friends in the art class. His Raymond is really creative, and I'm betting your child is too. They think of things in a way that we don't think of. They have a unique perspective on the world and what goes on around them, and they have that ability through art to show that. Theater was a huge win for us. It was not comfortable for me. I did not want to be a behind the stage mom. I did not want to attend every practice. I did not want to help create friendships behind the scenes, but that's what he needed and that's what I did. And those kids were so wonderful with him and for him. Um, there was a time when Raymond was on stage and they were learning this lesson, and I'm going to use my hands. So had to go from this side of the stage and they were dancing all the way across. And the kids were going all the way across. And by the time they were there, Raymond was still here. So he couldn't get across fast enough. And so she would say, run it again. And I was like, oh no, this is, Raymond's fault. He can't figure it out. And so we did it the second time. Still didn't do it. So I'm like, oh, do I get up there? Do I help? What do I do? She's like, okay, run it again. So they start over, third time, right? They're all together. They go, and these kids are going way faster than Raymond is. So this girl grabs his hand and they dance across the stage together, unprompted. I didn't have to intervene. Teacher didn't have to intervene. The students get it. And so when they're given those opportunities to help each other, that's what the world is about. That's what the beauty lies in inclusion and accepting each other. It was a wonderful season. The play I'll never forget was Pirates of Penzance. And Raymond couldn't even say Pirates of Penzance, but he just, whatever he said, I knew what he was saying. And it was a great, great little semester for us to do. Those kids in theater are often a little bit quirky. They're artsy. They get it. And so they were not at all concerned with Raymond or how different he was or anything. They were very, very accepting. Um, okay, I'm going to go on to slide number 8, which is tags on to inclusion, community, and being interdependent. Um, none of us, I love saying this, who is normal? I certainly am not normal. I can't even name one of my friends who's normal. Normal is a cycle on the washing machine. I have friends who have medical issues. I have friends that have mental health issues. I have friends that have physical, things that need to be that they are working on currently. Sometimes that's crutches, sometimes that's somebody in an arm sling. So we are all interdependent among each other. And so we can't forget that it's okay for Raymond to walk up in college and want to, and his card has a low balance, and somebody behind him is going to help. You would be willing to do the same thing. So we've got to remember that those things can be factored in as well. Um, I talked a little bit about inclusion and why the bigger picture is so important to our world. Remember those typical peers in the classroom, especially at a Catholic school, especially at a private school. These are going to be the doctors, the lawyers, the nurses. These are going to be the supervisors, all of this. And unless they're exposed to a student with a disability, a person with a disability, then they're not ever going to have a comfort level of what the expectations are or how best to speak with them, motivate them, or include them. So that's super important. Um, Number 9 is where to start. And as I said, that's early, that's now, learning to navigate things, learning to use Life 360, learning to use your maps on your phone. All of those take time and energy, and they're not something that's going to be learned right off the bat. So you've got to start practicing with those. We would specifically, say to Raymond, we're going to leave you here at the beach. We want you to walk down 2 blocks and one to the left and meet you here. And my husband and I would split up so that he could see him. Raymond didn't know it, but we would have him follow directions to get to a certain restaurant, or in the school, go to the gym and go to behind the goal to that closet or whatever. Like you've got to start navigating things and having them be a part of this process. Um, Having them pay for things, having them look at safety things. Visual charts are huge for Raymond. We have some in the morning that are, brush your teeth. He likes to check, wash your face, check. Is your child a checker? Are they a visual learner? What do they need to be reminded of doing these daily skills? And then getting your backpack, getting your shoes and socks on. We lump these into one thing to do, and they are not. Please remember that brushing your teeth means that you have to take the top off the toothpaste. You have to put it on your toothbrush. You need to put it all around your mouth, getting the back, getting the front. These are not one-step commands. We need to break them down and chunk them and then chain backwards as to what we want the final outcome to be. So remember to define what you're looking for. And going on to number 10 is, how do you define success? Did he brush his teeth independently? Did he only do it for 30 seconds? Like, you need to define what success looks like And what I would say, what you say might be different. You might say, well, it's okay if he does it at night, we can skip the morning. That might not be okay with me, but only your family can define that success. Is you have to remember there's a lot of failures that are going to happen in order to get to the end. Remember, I'm going to be totally off of my statistics, but Colby did not take all the free throw shots that he took, he did not make. And so you've got to keep going. You've got to keep trying and keep looking at where you're going and how, if it needs to be shaped differently, shaped, how to be successful. Um, Trying new jobs around the house, emptying the silverware might be super easy, but what else can your child be doing? Can they be loading their own clothes into the washer? Can you be setting a timer so that they're putting them in the dryer as well? Are they folding? Maybe not, but does that mean that they didn't complete laundry? No, it does not. Raymond does not like to fold his shirts when he puts them in his drawer. They're clean, they're wrinkly, and he says that he's successful. Who am I to say that he's not by defining a wrinkled, clean shirt as not successful? So remember that you need to talk about those kinds of things with your young adults. Um, I just wanted to also mention that as your child gets to be 14, in our state, it's actually 12, that your IEP starts to talk about transition skills. And that does not mean that they need to be done in a separate classroom. That does not mean that you need to utilize what the school is offering. You can change that format. VR and sometimes the Department of Aging in Maryland and Virginia has these services, and they have workshops on weekends. They have little job scale camps in the summer. So make sure you're watching out for those. So that sounds really young for your child to be doing those things, but I don't think so at all. So please reach out for those. Watch out for those. And then number 10, I'm sorry, we're on number 10. So I said, what's next? Making sure, I like to say, what's next? What action item can you do today? And that's just breaking down some of these little simple things and making sure that you've got the whole family on board. Well, how you say it, mom, is going to be different from dad, how you say it. And he needs both of those. He needs peer input. He needs brothers and sisters. The more you can be doing these skills with all of these different people, the more he's going to be successful. Um, that went really fast. I'm surprised. So we're almost at 50 minutes, but my closing thoughts are just to say, you know, uh, we always have to presume competence. We always have to presume that there's a way to get there. And we have to presume that our child knows and understands. And just because it doesn't come out verbally, just because he doesn't test and score 100%, does not mean that it's not in there. I can give you so many examples of how well Raymond did from being in that classroom, discussing the story, but when the test came, never going to happen, never going to see success. But that does not mean he didn't understand it and didn't get it. I love to use the analogy of Charlotte's Web. How many times Charlotte went to the fair, what the webs said, all of these different huge things that the other kids will test on. Raymond needs this much. He needs to know who Templeton was, who Charlotte was, who the I forgot his name, the who the pig was, right? He only needs to be tested on these things. And then we're going to chain backwards to make sure that he's got these, and anything additional that he gets is a bonus. So, make sure that you're defining success and what that looks like to you and your family. So I think we're at 50 to 50 if Donald wants to see if there are any questions.
We don't have any questions right now in the Q&A. I'm going to unmute participants if you want to, I'm granting you permission to speak. The default is you're muted. If you go down and to the microphone button in the lower corner and click it, it will remove the slash, and you can just pose a question in the audio stream of the webinar using the microphone. Um, or if you have a comment or just want to engage with Michelle, you can do so. While we're waiting for people to maybe collect their thoughts, I'll ask a question. So, you all have gone to a private Catholic school. Can you talk to about some of the challenges or maybe programs that are available in private schools where IDEA is not legally compulsory that you've coped with, and or maybe some of the things that they've done that private that public schools are not doing that is advantageous to you?
Yeah, for sure. As the the president of Fire Foundation Northeast Florida, there are 12 of us across the country right now. There are 12 affiliates from Sacramento down to Dallas, New Hampshire, and to Florida. So we cover the map. It is gaining traction. We like to call it a wave of inclusion. Our very first principal when we went in, after, and again, this is after having four schools say no to us, the fifth one finally said yes. And her question when we sat down at the table was one thing, was will he fit in with the other kids? And that's a yes, the kids will, I knew that the kids would love him and I knew he would love the other kids. And so then we chained backwards to figure out what he needs. He did some small pullouts, but that was actually done by somebody who used to be a speech therapist and had retired. And so we utilized her. The aide in the classroom was a classroom teacher who didn't want the classroom responsibility, but she was the one who modified the assignments for us. So we all took all of these people's gifts and talents and melded them into Raymond being very successful in Catholic school.
What what do you think made the difference with that one school and teacher that that might have allowed you to reach some of the other schools?
I think I think it's a lot of it has to do with transparency and honesty. We had a very honest conversation with her about what our expectations were. And right off the bat, I said, I know that Raymond's not at grade level. This was fifth grade. And she said, oh my gosh, I was so afraid you were going to ask me to keep him up to standard. And I said, no, absolutely not. I know him best. I knew what his reading level was. I knew exactly where he was, and I knew that that wasn't attainable. And so once I relieved that burden from her, you could see her immediately shift and go, oh, okay. And I said, I want him to have access to all of that general education material, just like Charlotte's Web. He picked up on things, but we're going to test these certain specific items. And then that freed all of us to know what success looks like, but not be so worried about all of the other details.
Teresa doesn't have a question, but she writes in the Q&A. Just wanted to thank Michelle from the bottom of my heart. I really appreciate how you view inclusion and your understanding about how important peers are for our students in the future. They get inclusion.
Awesome. I'm assuming that's Brandon's mom. Shout out to Brandon Gruber. Love you guys. Thank you again, Tash, for having me. This has been a blast, and I'm surprised it went by so fast. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to talk enough, and yet I did. So,
Well, does anyone else have a question they wanna ask? I'll give people a couple more seconds, and then we'll wrap up. Suzanne has raised her hand. Suzanne,
Hi.
go
Hi.
ahead.
Sorry, I have a vacuum going on in the back of my room, so I hope you can still hear me. Hi, Michelle. How are you? Uh,
hi.
so I guess my question is, and I missed the first 20 minutes or so, so I can't remember how old your son is. My son is 23. We have been the route of trying to find a college. I really want him to live on his own and live away for a while. We've been that route. We got an interview at UC Davis, didn't get in. Got an interview at UCLA, didn't get in. I personally, when my son was being included, I did not push the academics because my son is, I wanted him to learn from his peers the best he could, which he has, and he's very, very independent, has a lot of typical friends who still like, we're going to Stanford to visit his best friend from elementary school next weekend. But I feel like it's like the big drop off. They hit 22, and if they're not good enough for some of these think college programs, they don't get in. And now what? So it's a little it's hard to reach that. And my son's like in a day program now. He's like, so mom, I graduate from this like weird college program now, right? And I'm like, no, just think you're in a gap year. But it's the, where me and a lot of his friends are coming up against that right now because
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
those think college programs have a deadline of you have to be 23. For some of them, is the last age you can actually um, try to get them in. And as most of us have, we held our kid back a year. So by the time my son graduated high school, he was 19. So I just wonder what your thoughts are on
Yeah. And
evolving those
yeah.
programs for like
Yeah.
kids. We have such a small group of kids and it almost seems insurmountable.
Well, we were right there. Absolutely. Raymond, and again, I hate to use this word, but Raymond failed out of college. And I say that because that kind of stops everybody from asking the question. Raymond doesn't think he failed out of college. That's what you and I would define it as, unfortunately. Raymond was living his best life. He went on campus from August to November and gained 25 pounds. And so he became uh, all the stuff medically had some issues. So we had to redefine what if we wanted him to go back and if we were going to spend X amount of dollars, why wouldn't we create a different living situation where we had control over it? Because we repeatedly asked the college to step in. We asked them for more supervision. They said that wasn't their job. We asked them for more direction. That's not our job. Well, you know what? It's somebody's job. And so I'm going to manage that myself. And so that's what we decided is that if Raymond could live on campus, why can't he live in his own apartment? And so we got an apartment. That first time I mentioned with Maddie, it was a cute little apartment that was very close to a little walkable area in Jacksonville called San Marco. And so he walked to work to Biddy and Bose. And then he would walk home, walk to get food. Unfortunately, he walked a lot of times without authorization and with you using his credit card. But that was a great opportunity for us to figure out what else we needed to put into place. And so we have the second apartment with his roommate, and we run everything. Guess what? I'm really good at it. I know what he needs. I'm the expert. So we have a person who comes in 3 days a week and gets him uh, prepped for work, and she drives him to work. That's what he needs. He's not good at time management, executive functioning. That's an issue for him. So I'm going to put somebody in place for that. What else do you need to put into place? Because he absolutely can. What do we need in order to do so? So chain backwards to what success looks like.
Yeah, for sure. I totally, and I've followed your stories on it. And I guess I feel like, and I hope that this is something, Tash can get involved more in, our kids don't, especially kids with Down syndrome, they don't pass the academic test, right? I mean, in an alternate universe, my kid would have been that kid that was the jock he's special swimmer who just wanted to go to college and party, right? And have friends. But we can't do that now. And so I guess it's that's the biggest hurdle I'm at right now because he's almost 23. So
Raymond is 23 as well. Yeah. So again, just chain backwards. What do you say? You go out and rent an apartment for a year? No harm, no foul, as long as the monies are in place. Don't get me wrong. But then, what does that look like? Can he stay home alone? Do you have the Ring camera so you know when he leaves the building? Do you have the Life 360 so you know where he's going? And then you do safety, and then you do whatever else accommodations are needed. So glad to
well,
brainstorm with you. You know how to get a
now
hold of me.
we actually left him alone for a weekend. We went to Santa Barbara. He's fine on his own at home. I guess my thing is trying to find. I've been looking into college living experience, but when I went on one of their programs, all the kids seemed like they were academically focused. So I think that's where I'm finding our kids are on the outside of these models they're putting together. So, but anyway, I'd love to stay in touch and talk about it. I don't want to take any more
Absolutely.
time on this. But thank you, Michelle. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries.
we're at 3 o'clock, so we'll conclude here. This is the first episode in our 2026 webinar series. Part 2, Inclusive and Neurodiversity Affirming Online Course Design, presented by Jenny Turner, will be 1 week from today on Thursday, April 30th at the same time. You'll receive the usual participation emails. This session has been recorded. You'll receive a link to the recording as soon as I can get it edited and posted. And thank you to Michelle Techner for spending this hour talking about 10 tips
Yeah.
to create an inclusive and independent life.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Donald.